This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Sunday. I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We're here today to break down a Jets thrilling victory over the Atlanta Falcons. The Jets beat the Falcons 27-24 on a Nick Folk last-second field goal. It capped off a stellar day for Jets special teams. I think it's fair to say special teams were the MVP for the Jets in this game. We'll talk about that and the implications it has for this team going forward in a little bit. But we will begin by talking about what I think is the biggest story for the Jets in this game, and that is the emergence of Adonai Mitchell. Mitchell had a monster game with 8 catches for 102 yards. That includes a 52-yard touchdown that sparked the Jets offense in the second half. There is every opportunity over the last month and a half of the season for Adonai Mitchell to carve out a role for himself on this team going forward. Mitchell, of course, was part of the Sauce Gardner trade. The main part of that trade for the Jets were the 2 first-round picks they got from the Indianapolis Colts. But they also got Mitchell as kind of a throw-in. And he was a really logical throw-in because he's a talented guy, second-round draft pick recently, so a good draft pedigree, lots of physical ability. But his path to playing time in Indianapolis was blocked because the Colts have a talented and deep receiver room. Well, the Jets have plenty of opportunities for a young receiver who's looking to develop, who's looking to prove himself in the NFL. There's really nothing proven on this team after Garrett Wilson, and Garrett Wilson is injured. Mitchell's Jets career, of course, got off to a slow start. 2 weeks ago was his Jets debut on a Thursday night in Foxborough against the Patriots. It was a really rough game. He dropped 2 passes he should have caught. 2 could have been big plays that ended in incompletions. Last week against Baltimore, he was kind of quiet. You did see him flash a little bit on one big play where Tyrod Taylor extended the play. It was kind of a schoolyard football type situation. He was able to get the ball to Mitchell. Mitchell made an explosive play in open field. But this was a game where Adonai Mitchell looked like an NFL wide receiver. We know he's still a work in progress. Look, if you watched him in this game, he's still kind of raw as a route runner. He's got to learn some of the nuances, some of the subtleties. That means varying your tempos on your routes, slowing down, starting up to shake defenders. It means running crisp routes with sharp cuts. But you see the raw ability from Mitchell in this game. On that touchdown, he just ran past the Atlanta defense. He made it look easy. And when you can do that, it opens up a lot. Because for the rest of the game, you saw the Falcons give him a pretty heavy cushion. And that means it's a lot easier to complete out routes. It's a lot easier to complete just curl routes, in-breaking routes. The stuff that's underneath, if the other team respects you deep, it's going to be there. And I'm not going to say that Adonai Mitchell is now Tyrod Taylor's go-to guy, but I will say in this game, when the game was on the line, Adonai Mitchell was the guy Tyrod was looking for. And Adonai Mitchell delivered. It's way too early to proclaim Adonai Mitchell the next number 2 receiver on the Jets. I know people are going to do that. Well, people did that with John Metchie last week, and Metchie had multiple drops in this game. Mitchell and Metchie, they're both young receivers. They're both developing. They both have some work to do. What you're looking for is promise. You're looking for signs that maybe if things go right for them, they can develop into solutions for this team. If we're going to be honest, if Adonai Mitchell can develop into a number 4 receiver who's a quality deep threat, that's a pretty good outcome for the New York Jets. Jets don't need Adonai Mitchell to be a star for this to work out. Jets have a lot of resources this offseason. They're right now looking like they're going to be in the top 4 in salary cap space. There are going to be some quality receivers who will hit the open market this offseason. They have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks this year. They have 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick next year. There are going to be ample resources to add a wide receiver. So even if Adonai Mitchell's a good depth guy, even if he's a guy, you can send deep to take the top off of defense, a guy who steps in to fill in for a couple of weeks when your starter's out, hey, that's a good outcome for the Jets. But with his physical ability, there's a chance he could be more. There is a chance that he could develop into a quality starting receiver. And there's every opportunity over the last month and a half for him to get game reps, for him to show that he's developing. And his game does need some development. But this is a reminder of the potential there. And when we're talking about guys with potential, this is what you want to see. Just like you saw with John Metchie last week. Now, I know Metchie had a rough game in this one, a couple drops. I don't really understand the way the Jets used Metchie in this game. They used him on a lot of manufactured touches in space. That's not really his game. Look, Mitchell had a rough game 2 weeks ago. You shouldn't have written him off then. Metchie had a rough game in this one. You shouldn't write him off now. Metchie was really good last week. Mitchell was really good this week. What you're looking for the Jets over this final phase of the season is for young guys to use these reps and show that they are making steps forward and show that there is untapped potential. And that's what's exciting about Mitchell, because if he's more than that depth receiver I was talking about, if he's the kind of guy who can develop into a quality starter, stylistically, he's like a perfect fit with Garrett Wilson. He does what Garrett Wilson can't. He's a prototypical X receiver. Garrett Wilson's a guy who can play the X, and that's the spot that's on the end of the line of scrimmage where you are lined up on the line, so you are susceptible to press coverage. Garrett Wilson can play that, but I think you're better off with Garrett Wilson on the move, with Garrett Wilson seeing a healthy share of his snaps in the slots. If Mitchell can handle that role on the outside, be a vertical threat, be a guy who's physical, be a guy who you have trouble pressing because he's big and because he's fast and because missing your jam means that you can get beat deep. It's a big deal for this Jets team. Now, one game is one game. We don't want to go overboard. We don't want to crown Mitchell the next great Jets receiver based on one game. But this was a very exciting game. And I think at the end of week 13, you have to be a lot more optimistic about Adonai Mitchell's potential than you were heading into this game, because this was a stellar performance. This was a 100-yard game for a guy who is probably still learning the playbook right now, for a guy who is still really learning how to play the wide receiver position, for a guy who you're not really sure what you have. This was what you wanted to see. If you told me that the Jets would win this game heading into today, I would have been happy, because I'm not a believer in tanking for this Jets team. If you told me they'd win this game and a big part of that would be Adonai Mitchell going over 100 yards, I would be ecstatic. Now, here in the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about something else that should make Jets fans ecstatic: the play of special teams. Special teams was a huge part of this victory in a day where the Jets offense, outside of Adonai Mitchell, was kind of inconsistent. And even though this was just one win in a lost season, the performance of special teams could be a big deal going forward for the Jets. And I'll explain why as we continue here on this Sunday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. And that's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands, and it makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You can also head on out to MetLife Stadium. I know it's a difficult year for the Jets, but that means tickets will be available for these final couple Jets home games through December and January. And I love using Game Time because they give you the price before you buy. There are no hidden fees, so you know exactly what you're paying before you hit the pay button. And they also give you the view from your seats. They show you what it's going to look like where you're sitting, so no surprises when you show up at your venue. It's not just sports. You can do it. You can use Game Time for music, comedy, theater, you name it. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup and Jets tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, Game Time. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Prize Picks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports. Bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes, and it's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is Prize Picks, because Prize Picks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. And Prize Picks has added an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smoother and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats: fantasy score, field goals attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. And the early payout feature is a great bonus. When your lineup starts strong, you may get the option to cash out early. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. And today we are here to talk about a thrilling New York Jets victory as they defeat the Atlanta Falcons 27-24 at MetLife Stadium. The winner came on a Nick Folk 56-yard field goal as time expired, and it capped what was simply a stellar game from Jets special teams. In fact, I think it's fair to say that special teams played a huge role in 2 of the 3 Jets wins so far in 2025. There was the game against Cleveland where they returned 2 kicks for touchdowns. In this game, there was score after score that was the result of Jets special teams. And, we could talk about in the first half where the Jets recovered a muffed punt almost on the Atlanta goal line, which set up a Breece Hall touchdown. That got the Jets into the locker room tied 7-7 in a game where the offense really struggled in the first half. The first half of this game really resembled a preseason game. I think it was true in the players that the Jets were putting on the field because, Jets are loading the field with young players right now. This is a full youth movement in New York. It is all about the future. They're trying to win games right now, but they're really trying to develop players. And that's kind of like what you're looking at in preseason. It was true based on the quality of the play. These teams combined for 8 punts in the first half. The Jets scored their only touchdown again when they recovered a muffed punt almost on the Atlanta goal line. The Falcons scored their only touchdown on a drive at the end of the half when they were in the 2-minute drill. It was also true. It also looked like a preseason game based on the stands because stands were pretty empty. And you might expect that in a lost season for the Jets, a holiday weekend, and a bad weather game. Well, in the second half, this game got exciting, and Jets special teams continued to deliver. Isaiah Williams ran a kickback and set up a Jets field goal. And this was a game where the Jets offense really struggled up until like late in the fourth quarter. The special teams kind of kept the Jets afloat. The Jets put 10 points on the board in the last 2 minutes of this game. Prior to that, they had 17 points, and 10 of them were set up by special teams. The 7 that were set up by the muffed punt return recovery, and the 3 that were set up by the Isaiah Williams kick return. And then there was a sequence in the last 2 minutes that set the Jets up to win this game. When the Jets were able to flip field position, they were kind of trapped deep in their own territory. They went 3 and out, and then Austin McNamara, who has been great all season, hit a huge punt. He hit a 55-yard punt, and Quantez Stiggers was able to tackle the return guy for only 1 yard. So the Jets were really backed up. They were punting from their own 13-yard line. A bad punt there, and the Falcons are on the cusp of field goal range before they even snap the ball. McNamara was able to flip the field by 54 yards. The Jets got a quick 3 and out, and then Isaiah Williams was able to run back a 40-yard punt 16 yards. So Atlanta only netted 24 yards on their punt. So that's a sequence right there where the Jets net 54 yards. Atlanta only nets 24 yards. The Jets essentially flipped field position by 30 yards in that situation. They gave their offense a short field. Offense was able to do enough to get Nick Folk at the field goal range. And then Folk, who finally missed his first kick of the season earlier in the game, drilled a 56-yarder as time expired to give the Jets a win. It was all about, this win was owed a lot to special teams. It was a standout performance. And we know this is a lost season for the Jets. And we know that this win, doesn't really mean a whole lot. There's the argument that you're building a culture going forward. And I buy into that to some degree. There are going to be some people that were upset that the Jets won this game because it hurts their draft position. But my focus is on special teams because we're in evaluation mode. And evaluation mode is partially for players. We're talking about young guys like Adonai Mitchell who step up in this game. But evaluation mode is also for coaches. And there was a lot not to love about the Jets coaching staff in this game. On the offensive side of the ball, there was some things Tanner Engstrand did that left me scratching my head. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. They were using John Metchie in space a lot. And Metchie has skills. Metchie's a good route runner, but he's not a dynamic guy in space. And the Jets weren't getting the ball to Breece Hall in space enough. In fact, I think that for much of this game, the Jets were underutilizing Breece Hall once again. On the defensive side of the ball, the Jets had to enter this game knowing that there were really 2 players who could beat them. And those 2 players were Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts. And what happened in this game? Well, Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts both had huge games. Robinson had 142 rushing yards on 23 carries. He added 51 receiving yards on 5 catches. Pitts went 7 catches for 82 receiving yards. The Jets' scheme just did not stop these guys. And part of it's that they weren't executing, but the Jets also weren't doing enough to stop these guys. And on key downs, when the Atlanta's going to Kyle Pitts, you should put a corner on him. And the Jets simply were not doing that. But on special teams, I think the Jets have found a real gem in their coach, Chris Banjo, a young guy who they got from Denver. And the great Mike Westhoff recommended Banjo. Westhoff was Banjo's mentor in Denver. Westhoff was a longtime Jets special teams coach, has a relationship with Aaron Glenn. He mentioned when Glenn was hired that he was going to play a role perhaps in helping the Jets find a good special teams coach. Jets special teams have been phenomenal this year. again, 2 of their 3 wins are due in no small part to special teams. This was a game where I think you could fairly say that on both offense and defense, the Jets were outplayed. I mean, the Jets were outgained 389 to 269 in this game. The defense did not play well against a limited Atlanta team. They gave up 24 points. The offense, I mean, again, they had the 10 points in the last 2 minutes. Prior to that, though, they had the 7 points from the Adonai Mitchell touchdown, and then the 10-point special team set up. Special teams is critical in the NFL, and we know the Jets are a bad team right now, but the Jets want to be a good team. You go back to the last time the Jets were good. It was the Rex Ryan era, 2009, 2010, the early Rex days. In the games that they won, the big games, it was always special teams making a play. It was always the Jets outperforming their opponent on special teams. Whether it's Antonio Cromartie running back a big kickoff return in the wild card round against the Colts, whether it's the Jets stopping a Patriots fake punt in the upset win in 2020 in the divisional round over Foxborough. It always felt like special team played a role. And this is a league where 50 to 60% of games come down to one score. And one score games, can come down to luck in many cases, but the hidden things sometimes swing a game. Can the third phase of the game step up? The Jets may not be good this year, but at some point we hope they are good. And a special teams unit like that can be a differentiator in a one-score game. When you outplay your opponent the way the Jets have so many times this season on special teams. Very encouraging to see, because it shows that, first of all, you have a coach who understands schemes. It shows you have a coach who understands how to utilize player skill sets. It shows you have a coach who understands how to coach guys up. There's a lot to question on this Jets coaching staff right now. I mean, this team is still 3-9, despite its lack of talent. Coaching does have to take some grief for that. But I think that it's clear right now that the Jets may have found a star special teams coach in Chris Banjo. And there's a lot to be encouraged about based on the way this unit is playing. Anyway, that's all for our Sunday edition, breaking down the Jets game today. Jets beat the Atlanta Falcons. Tune in tomorrow. This is the Locked On Podcast Network. Our motto is your team every day. We'll have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, continuing to break down this 2025 Jets season. We'll talk again tomorrow more about this Jets win over the Falcons. Until then, take care. Have a great Sunday night.